Okay, thank you very much. It looks like this session is really, really well organized because we're moving back and forth between technology, digital and analog. So after having looked at the UN and technology, we are basically going back to analog, and we basically will look at a room, basically. And that's the point. I might actually give you a little bit of background here on why actually the room. Earlier this year, in January, we introduced a new master's program, a Master of Advertising, and this might actually be a good point to thank Raul and everyone in the faculty for actually making this possible. But basically the idea behind a Master of Advertising program is that it's basically 50% traditional coursework. The other 50% is what we call advertising studios, basically where we task students to more or less run an advertising agency. So where we bring in clients, they at a certain point will be tasked with bringing in clients, developing business plans, dealing with clients, actually taking projects from the very beginning brief to implementation phase, because we notice that this is something that's sometimes missing in our courses. We always talk about strategies and how to put together a proposal or a campaign plan, but actually implementation, the whole things that goes into working with clients, communicating and so forth, is usually a bit of a problem. So in this context, we actually said we would really like to have a room, and a room not so much as a kind of, also as a teaching space, but also as a teaching tool. And I guess this is something we would like to talk about a little bit. But going back first about teaching in general and what we have in mind when we think about teaching a kind of practice simulated workplace environment program. So I came across this article. I guess some of you know about The Conversation. It's this website where academics write about topics. And I came across this article on basically universities, that's the main premise here, had to change because we were educating students in skills for jobs, but in many industries, these jobs might not be around at the time students actually graduate. This might not be the case for quantitative surveying or for accountants, but in our discipline, advertising very much so. So when I worked in advertising, when I started teaching, or when I stopped working in advertising, Facebook, Instagram were still kind of new things. And advertisers tried to find a way around how do we actually deal with this. So in our industry, change is really, really fast-paced. So the idea is, okay, if change and jobs change so quickly, what is it actually we need to educate people, students in? In this article, the author claims it's about a kind of enterprising skills, entrepreneurial spirit. I think there might be something to it. I don't really like the term, but in general, I think it's kind of interesting. I usually get a little bit nervous when I hear people talking about that the job of universities is to get students job ready. That's to a certain extent, I guess, true, but I think it's much more important to think about getting people, students, career ready. And this is a big difference in my view. Career is about a lifelong project. It's about values I bring to the job. It's about thinking about the good life. It's about practical skills, but much more about certain fundamental skills. And in this article, again, one quote here, the author says, we should probably move away from measuring academic success according to rigid marking criteria, and we should learn about the experience and cycle of failure inherent to creative project. And this pretty much appeals to us. So we said, okay, we would actually like, when we think about certain core qualities we would like to teach, it's at the very center, it's about initiative. We sometimes find people, students, being rather passive at times, expecting us to basically deliver knowledge, pass on knowledge, and if I check all the boxes and I follow marking criteria, this is what will get me to a certain point. I think at undergrad level, this is sometimes a useful strategy. At postgraduate level, not so much. So for us, it's the idea, how can we actually instill some kind of initiative, spirit into, okay, I would actually like to do something, I would like to own things, success as well as failure. I need to think about my project and my whole life from a creative perspective, from a perspective of reflective confidence, not I'm the greatest, but actually I am confident, I can make judgment, I trust my judgment, but based on reflection. And the idea of professional communication, meaning how can our students actually communicate professionally with clients and other people. So this is basically fundamentally the idea, I guess, around which we build this studio. And then, as I said, we were lucky. We were allocated a spot, a place, a space, which looked somewhat like this. Okay, which is kind of nice, but not really conducive to our way of teaching or working. So the first thing we did, we gave students, our first cohort, a task. We told them, look, you've got a budget of $1,000. We would now like you to turn this space, transfer this space into a workspace, into a creative workspace that would, in the end, work for you. So here again, the very first step in thinking about using space, not only as a teaching space, but as a teaching tool. We are transferring responsibility onto students and say, you create your own space now. Okay, and you have to have ownership of this particular room. And then we gave a little, description. What is it we would like you to do? And we got them thinking about, okay, what kind of spaces do you actually need? We have a very small space, but we need to think about different tasks we perform while working on creative projects. So you need a presentation space, you need a collaborative space where you can exchange ideas, strategic thinking spaces for people who would like to work more silently, inspiring spaces, comfortable spaces for chilling out, private spaces, social spaces, and so forth. So basically, we asked them to think about, okay, how can we actually use the limited space we have to its maximum potential? We talked a little bit more about criteria that go into designing spaces. We talked about different types of people and how they relate to space in an office, from anchors, navigators, gatherers that go along with different roles and functions in an agency or in an office in general. And we basically showed them, because not many students are actually familiar with what real advertising agencies look like. So we presented them with a couple of pictures we took while visiting agencies, and basically told them, look, this is a rather small space, but have a look at it and see, okay, different areas, usable spaces in this room. Think about how you could basically implement things. And as I said, these are images taken at actual advertising agencies. Boardroom, the meeting space. The most important part of an office, and so forth. So this is basically, in a nutshell, what we aim to do. We got our students working on this project in January. It's still work in progress, but I think we made significant progress. And now we would be happy to actually invite you over. So maybe quickly wrapping it up, showing a little bit of the process actually students went through, because we told them not to just come up with ideas, but actually create models, measurements, 3D models of what they thought the space should actually look like. And in the end, the first assignment was basically to create a report on how this project actually went, what kind of difficulties they encountered, how they dealt with difficulties, and so forth. And maybe a last thing, we talked about ownership. So Susie and I, we were quite pleased because we might have new students joining our program, and our initial students a couple of weeks ago, without being prompted, actually came up with house rules. Basically how you are supposed to behave in this particular room. And I can tell you, I usually like things neat and tidy, but I would probably have problems following these set of rules. So basically, in terms of taking ownership, I think they did a really good job. Okay, that's about it.
Can I just add?
Yeah, please.
The students have been down there scrambling for last-minute housekeeping. They have got such pride of ownership of the space that we have rules to follow, that we're not allowed to give the code out to anyone without their permission. And when they found that we'd actually had some other people through the room, it was like, you hadn't told us. So I had to apologise. One of the things in the report that they reflected on, which was really interesting, was how that we had dealt with some of the challenges in getting the room together, whether it was the budget, whether it was who did what, how we did it, being resourceful. And we have really to thank Linda and Raoul enormously, particularly for the challenge of moving away from the corporate white walls. You'll see what I mean when we get down there.